All right. Well, in Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. I had a nice weekend. We had a little bit of a family gathering, kind of sad event commemorating the life of a very close, very dear family member who passed in March, and very beloved person. So that was tough, but it was bittersweet because a lot of friends and family came together to celebrate their life, and it was that was nice. All right, hope you had like I said, hope otherwise the weekend was okay. Very hot here, very miserable in terms of the weather. The humidity continues to be brutal, and this is, we discuss it. It's the ecocide. It's the human caused global Holocaust, and there's an ethnic Holocaust going on as well, the genocide of the Gazans, and that's something that we focus here. It's going to be a major topic of today's program, what Israel is doing, what it's doing in Gaza, what it's doing in the West Bank, what the United States has done to help, if you want to use the word help, Israel kill Gazans, wipe a group of people off the face of the earth. So that's what we're going to discuss, say, the complicity, the culpability of both parties, why it's happening, who's to, is there some sort of ideology? Can we point fingers? I mean, Cenk Uygur had quite a peroration. We'll play a little bit of it. In my opinion, he kind of lets off some of the Democrats. I wouldn't do it the way he did it. I don't think it was terrible. I don't think he was wrong factually, but he kind of made some excuses that I don't think ultimately satisfy in terms of justifying the actions of these bad Democrats or Republicans or any other group. So we'll talk about all of that. Hope you join us, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646, and we'll revisit the story that played a big role in Friday's program with Carlos, and that was the Wall Street Journal report that Trump wrote a pretty intimate, somewhat, I guess, crude, I wouldn't even say it was somewhat, a crude email or crude letter, it wasn't email, crude letter to wish Jeffrey Epstein, the serial sex offender, the abuser of underage girls. So clearly would certainly appear from the article by the Wall Street Journal, Trump very much involved with Epstein and his crimes. This is in direct contravention to what Trump has said in recent years, and we'll talk about that as well. But we're going to focus, as I mentioned, on Gaza, and the situation there, just awful. It was a terrible weekend in Gaza. I said, I hope you had a nice weekend. If you did, you weren't in Gaza. The death toll now over 59,000. That's official. Those are deaths that are directly attributable to Israeli military action in Gaza since the attack by Hamas on October 7th at the festival in 23. And my son, I think it was my son, made a really good point. We've talked about this, is that the deaths that are included in that over 59,000, they're very limited to those that people who were killed directly by Israeli action, generally by bombs, missiles, gun fire, bullets. So people, those are a good example. Somebody is injured. They're taken in the hospital in Gaza, if there is one, or to some sort of, MASH, some sort of surgical unit or some sort, and they don't have the necessary medications. They don't have the necessary supplies to save the life. And so the person dies. The wounds were the proximate cause, but they could have been saved. And I was told that in a case like that, they may not attribute that death to the Israeli killing, because presumably the person would have lived, but for the lack of medical care, rather than but for the attack by Israel, but for the assault. It's interesting what is and what isn't included. Do people who starve to death, are they considered casualties of Israel? It's an interesting question, and I don't really know the answer because it's not clear. When you read in Anadolu-Ajansi, they always give the number, and we'll show it right now. I told you over 59,000. That just in the past 24 hours, as of the publication, which was about 4 hours ago, I believe, of this story, maybe a few hours even earlier, but early this morning well, actually not early this morning, relatively early this morning in the United States, not so early in the Middle East, they came up with, that is the health ministry in Palestine, came up with the number 59,029 killed, and they identified 134 bodies brought to the hospital. So they're saying, yeah, if you're brought to the hospital, then that's considered death by Israel. So I don't know exactly how that plays out. I guess if the person is brought to the hospital, they're not dead, they're just injured, and then they're not saved. That might or might not be considered Israel's responsibility. That also might depend on whether the surgeon attributes the direct death to a lack of supplies or to the actual bullet wound. I just, again, don't know. What we do know is Israel has completely decimated, is destroying, is razing Gaza to the ground, and the number of dead are really now in the hundreds of thousands, despite a health ministry statement of over 59,000. And there's the actual official count, 59,089 Gazans, 422 Friday, because we didn't have an updated number Friday through today, and now over 8,000, well over 8,000 killed by Trump and Netanyahu, with over 4,000 being an estimate of the women and children killed by Israel. Just absolutely horrific. I do think this is the worst. Again, I've said this many times. I'll keep saying it. This is the worst crime that I'm aware of, that I've seen, that I can, say that this, transpired in real time while I was paying attention. Now, again, we were bombing Cambodia, and estimates are there are millions of Cambodians killed by the U.S. Air Force under Nixon. What we did to Iraq ultimately probably led to over 1 million dead in Iraq. The destabilization of Iraq by the U.S. government, the toppling of the regime change. But ultimately, this is clearly an intentional genocide. This is an action Israel's taking deliberately, simply to kill Palestinians, simply to wipe Gaza off the map. And you see this here, 73 people killed. This is from this morning on CNN. I saw a number up to 99 in Anadolu-Ajansi, so they may have updated it. This was a little earlier. I thought I'd go with the U.S. outlet because maybe many of you, maybe many Americans who have stumbled onto my program view CNN as a more credible source than the Turkish news agency. I don't personally, at least when it comes to these types of stories. Maybe if there's coverage of Erdogan, I would have some skepticism about what I'm told by Turkish news services. But when it comes to coverage of Israel, I'm less skeptical, frankly, of a country in the Middle East that's reporting on Israel, if it's not Israel. And even there, Haaretz seems to do a pretty good, pretty reputable job. The U.S. news has just simply media, and we've exposed this many times, the failure of American media to report honestly, accurately, ethically on Israel. It just failed. It just clearly failed. And that'll be part of this program as well. We're going to get to that with comments by Cenk Uygur, again, from the Young Turks. Didn't agree with everything he said, thought he was a little bit too prepared to come up with some kind of justification or excuse for some of the libs or progressives, faux-gressives term I use in Congress, but he got a lot right too, so we're not going to be too hard on old Cenk. Again, 240-242-5646, and I do urge you, please do subscribe If you haven't yet done so, like the video. Any interaction you have, any comments you have, like or dislike, absolutely help us cut through, as they say, the algorithm. Beat the algorithm. That's what we're hoping to do here. So again, just register some form of approval in some kind of way. That'd be really, really nice. Finally, love to see the new people signing up on Facebook at Halitics. That's been pretty cool. So love to see that. Hope that more of you will join us on Halitics, comment, make your position known on various issues of the day that we cover. And Halitics is a great place to do that. Facebook. It's really easy. Anyone can comment there. Anyone can join. We don't have any limitations on the ability to participate. The only ones after the fact, if you join and you're mean-spirited, you're insulting, you're dismissive of the poster. Not talking about AOC, you're not talking about Trump. You want to insult them, go ahead. I mean, don't lie, don't make things up, but you want to criticize them, please do. When it comes to the people who post at Halitics, we really try to keep it a somewhat of a safe space. All right, 240-242-5646. Just want to go over this real quick because it kind of sets the tone for today's program more than some of the others. And you can see, we'll get to the my headline in the middle in yellow with the magenta outline, but just some of the headlines there. So UK, France, and 23 other countries say the war in Gaza must end now. That's from today by the AP. Less than half in US now sympathetic towards Israelis. And those headlines might cause you to think, well, why would Congress then authorize millions for Israel? Why would Congress, by, I think, was it 90, some ridiculously high number, 97%, something like that, vote in favor of the Iron Dome for Israel, even though having that protective shield that they use is clearly a major reason that Israel is engaging in this genocidal war. They were really afraid that Iran, some of Iran's missiles that are drone attacks were hitting, and they were running out of the interceptors. And if Israel didn't have that kind of confidence that it will not get hit badly, that it can lay waste to other world capitals, to other countries, that it can kill thousands of people and only maybe one or two missiles will get through the Iron Dome that it uses, then it feels much more immune from any kind of consequences. And so one of the worst things we can do is give Israel that protection from the consequences of its actions. And yet that's exactly what the House did, seeming to completely ignore how world opinion has shifted against Israel. And not just world, but American opinion, right? And not just democratic opinion, but the general public all now are moving further and further away from any kind of real sympathy or support for Zionism. You'd think, given that fact, or at least for the kind of bloodthirsty, merciless Zionism that Israel practices, you'd think that Congress would have gotten the message. They obviously didn't. And that's the question. Is this just AIPAC? Is this an invincible AIPAC? And I think there's a strong argument, yes. I think it's really, there's a real good case to be made that it's purely money. It's fear and greed alone. There once was a point that I think there was, especially you're a Jewish representative, or you maybe put differently, you represent majority Jewish or plurality Jewish districts. The Jews in your district perhaps are very monolithic in their voting. And I think this was the case for decades. Then you say, well, it's not AIPAC exactly. It's actually my district. My district is very pro-Israel. But that's just not the case now, with few exceptions. clearly the constituencies around this country just don't love Israel, don't support Israel. So what could explain such overwhelming support for Israel, with the exception of 6 Congress members, including one who's in a district that, at least as I understand it, does kind of tend to be pretty pro-Israel, pretty Jewish. We'll get to that. But the main, this all was triggered. The story came about. I decided to discuss it because Marjorie Taylor Greene did the right thing last week. She introduced legislation to stop a grant of money, to stop the funding by the United States of that Iron Dome, those interceptors that were used, to great effect on Israel's behalf to prevent much more damage by Iran. And some of the drones and missiles got through, but most did not because of Iron Dome. And this is what, again, gives Israel its sort of sense of invulnerability. We can kill generals, we can assassinate people, we can practice regime change, destroy Syria, create a power vacuum there, lead to terrible situation in other countries, as well as practice genocide against Gaza, which we occupy, and keep stealing the land in Palestine. We can do all of that without really any fear at all of reprisals against Israelis because of that Iron Dome. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene says, hey, let's stop it. Let's stop giving them that money. Let's stop giving them $500 million. We're going to give it to them. We're not that we're going to sell it even. We're going to give it to them. I don't think we should sell them a damn thing, but we most certainly shouldn't give them anything. So Marjorie Taylor Greene here says we should stop it. And this what the impetus for that legislation last week, July 18, so that would have been Thursday. The impetus for that was Friday. Well, the impetus was the bombing of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza. And this is not the first time I think that church has been hit. And we know it's served as a refuge for Palestinians. The priest there has just said, hey, if you're all welcome. You're all God's children. You come to the church if you need some kind of a refuge. And Israel hit the church, and then they made some sort of excuse. We're sorry about it, or whatever. It was a mistake. So here's what Middle East Eye says. Hardline America Firster and staunch Trump supporter Taylor Greene voted alongside progressive Dem Rashida Tlaib, who is the only Palestinian person of Palestinian descent in Congress, and Ilhan Omar, Muslim. She's a Muslim. Omar is from Somalia, or her family. I think she is a Somali. Maybe she was born here. To strip Israel of $500 million in U.S. funding hours after bombing the Holy Family Catholic Church. So there's 3 names, right? It was a 422-6 vote against the Taylor Greene amendment. And so you see 3 names there, 3 women, Greene, Tlaib, Omar. Also joining them was Summer Lee from Pittsburgh. And I mentioned at least one district that has got a significant Jewish population. That's Summer Lee in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a good-sized Jewish population in Squirrel Hill, and I believe that is part of Lee's district. And there was a point when she first ran where AIPAC really tried to defeat her, and they lost. They failed, which is a really good thing. But again, showing their power isn't quite what they present it to be, to defeat people. So those are 3 Dems, right? Taylor Greene is the Republican, the other Republican, Tom Massey, and then 4 Dems, Tlaib, Omar, Summer Lee, and Al Green from Houston, all, to their great credit, voted against funding that Iron Dome. So they were absolutely right to do that. And, of course, the question is, what's the matter? What's wrong with all those other Congress members, including virtually every Democrat? 422-6. Israeli cooperative programs. I think just give it. It's just a gift. It's just a gift to Israel. It's a gift that protects them from the consequences of their murderous actions. one of the representatives who I think some people would have thought, I might have thought, but I'm not shocked. I wasn't surprised at all, but whatever. It's what I expect, I guess, from her. AOC did not join her fellow squad members. Squad obviously not united. They do what, often they feel is best, regardless of whether there's a progressive case to be made, whether they could, by joining forces, move progressive legislation. No, they don't do that. They don't. That's just not what they're about. And it's, again, a huge disappointment because, we elected them to be a force, to be a united force against the corporate elites who control both parties. And they've just failed completely to do that. They failed in that, and they haven't even tried, as far as I can tell. They sure don't seem to be trying. So here's AOC defending herself against the criticism, totally justified, totally right, that she should have gotten and did get. She says, well, the amendment does nothing to cut off offensive aid to Israel, nor end the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza. Of course, I voted. Of course. And I love the of course. I highlight that. It's such gaslighting by her. It's really important to understand this is what AOC is doing here. She's trying to make you feel, oh my God, how wrong. It's an of course. It's so obvious this is a bad bill. Well, if you feel like it doesn't go far enough, why didn't you put together an amendment, a side-by-side amendment to cut off some of the offensive aid? I know you can vote against the whole appropriation, which you did, I believe, although you don't say that here, but I think you at one point did vote against some appropriations package. But hey, if you can't stop the entire package, you should join amendments. You should try to hobble the bill. You should use any strategy you can to weaken our support for Israel. And instead, you have this absurd, it's not, this is what we call, by the way, the perfect being the enemy of the good. It would be better to cut off Iron Dome funding. It would be better not to give Israel those interceptor missiles. There's no question about it. And yet she's saying because it doesn't completely end all support for Israel, which I don't know that she's called for, because it doesn't do that, of course I voted against it. And her concern is that now if we cut off the defensive Iron Dome, some Israeli civilians will be killed, they'll get bombed while allowing the actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. Well, you know what, again, you can do both. You could say we're not going to protect Israelis anymore. We're just not. We're done with that. We're not going to protect Israeli civilians from the consequences of the government that they continue to vote for. I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims to this war is constructive to its end. Well, you're wrong. Because if Israel knew, if Bibi knew that by bombing Gazans, innocent refugees, for example, if he knew that by killing Iranian generals in their homes and nuclear scientists, if he knew that, and their families, if he knew that by doing that, Israeli citizens were going to get killed, that the many, many, many more bombs were going to fall on Israel, including, and missiles and other weapon systems would get through. If he knew that, including some that might hit him, he'd be a lot less likely to launch those attacks in the first place, right? A lot less. And not only that, if a few Israelis started getting hit, if towns and villages in Israel start to look just a little bit, just like maybe one little neighborhood or one block started to look like all of Gaza does now, then maybe some of those Israelis who are so gung-ho, so supportive of the campaign to destroy Gaza, to wipe it off the face of the earth, as the Hebrews did to Amalek, 4,000 years ago or whatever the Bible says happened. Maybe they wouldn't be so gung-ho for Bibi if the fruits of the war that they support now were brought home to them. The costs of the war, they started to have to pay those costs too. Just maybe. Now, I get her point to a degree. Of course, we shouldn't be giving Israel anything. We shouldn't give them any bomb. We shouldn't give them any missile. We shouldn't give them any bullet. And we certainly shouldn't give them any interceptor missiles either. But her argument is absurd. I remain focused on kind of the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate the genocide in Gaza. Well, you failed completely, and it's a lie to say that you remain focused on that, because remember how you told the American people that Kamala was working tirelessly for a ceasefire, and we know that was a lie. She couldn't have been, because the Israeli minister said, I want to give a lot of thanks to the Biden administration, because not one time, not once did they ever tell us to stop. Not once did they threaten to hold up supplies. So not a word you're saying, AOC, is true. And I was very, very, very pleased to see a ton of pushback. Now, she wasn't ratioed. In other words, there weren't more comments to her tweet, her X, whatever you call it, than there were likes. She got a few more likes. She got about 20,000 likes and 16,000 comments. As I understand it, they say you're ratioed. If you have more comments than likes, it means people are taking issue with what you say. They're not just blindly liking it. But even if she got a 20 to 16 ratio, 20 likes for every 16 comments, compare that with the number one commenter with respect to this tweet by AOC. This is Caitlin Johnstone. She gets 32,000 likes and 101 comments. So, like, she kills in the ratio. She has a 3,200, something like some crazy high number, 32,000, 320 to 1 ratio. So 320 to 1 ratio for Caitlin Johnson likes to comments, a huge positive ratio for her, whereas AOC gets a 5 to 4. 320 to 1, 5 to 4, 321 supporting Johnston. So I didn't give, her response is so spot on to AOC. I didn't give the mass shooter guns and ammo. I just bought him a bulletproof vest so nobody could stop the massacre. It's 100% right. And then the extremely estimable Aaron Mate. If you recognize that Israel is committing a genocide, which she did say at one point, she never used the word though, why are you voting to give them money for anything? Right? Isn't that a great question? Like, it would be like giving money to Nazi Germany and saying, well, these are anti-aircraft guns. They're not actually bombs, but we're just giving them anti-aircraft guns so that they can't be bombed. So our bombers can't get through. It's crazy. It's just crazy talk by AOC. And the good news is nobody's buying it. Nobody's accepting her crap. They, like, she has her diehards. I get it. And the institutions, the PDAs and our revolutions aren't going to call her out. But the bottom line is there's widespread recognition that AOC is a phony. I think that's pretty much, it's getting more and more clear to more and more people at this point. And there's no need for her. But the other thing that's so sad is she doesn't have to be. She is popular in her district. People love her in her district. I wish they didn't, but they do. She doesn't have to make excuses all the time for the horrible, for horrible decisions that she makes and that others, she doesn't have to make excuses for Israel. She doesn't have to try to justify doing the wrong thing. Just do the right thing, AOC. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is from the Young Turks, where I think they really, they get some of it right. I'll certainly make my commentary. Here we go.
Do you want to know why 98% of the crooks in Congress voted that way? Because AIPAC is the #1 donor to Congress in this election cycle. #1 donor. Anyone who doesn't tell you that in the context of this story, which by the way is literally every single mainstream media outlet, they're all giant liars covering up for the state of Israel, saying, oh, no. Oh, the AIPAC money had nothing to do with it. Oh, I'm sure. And the 17 billion we give in oil subsidies, the oil companies' donations had nothing to do with it, right?
All right, so let me stop it there for a sec. So Cenk makes a really good point, and he's really angry and pissed off. And frankly, I get it. I am too. He's just simply saying, hey, the reason it couldn't be clearer, these Congress members are corrupt. They take the money from AIPAC, which is the biggest single source of funding for Congress members is AIPAC more than any other. They take AIPAC money, and then they vote the way AIPAC wants, even though that's in support of genocide. I mean, it's evil. It's pure evil. AIPAC is evil, but so are the Congress members. And he draws an analogy. He says, yeah, just like all that money that the oil companies shell out to Congress, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're doing nothing to stop consumption of fossil fuels. Continue the subsidies to fossil fuel companies. Yeah, exactly, Cenk, you're right. That's right. Congress is totally corrupt. The individual members of Congress are totally, with very few exceptions, corrupt. That's just the way, you're right. So what do we do about it? The answer, we have to vote for people from other parties. We have to vote for Greens, for independents. It's not, and the argument, well, that I hear from some is, well, AOC, she doesn't take corporate money. Jamie Raskin, they don't take corporate money. Okay, maybe they don't. I don't know. But they do what the corporations want. They do the wrong thing over and over again. Maybe because they're just under pressure from their colleagues. And I talked about this on Friday. Maybe it's too much. We're asking for too much from them. They're not capable. They can't. It's too much to ask humans to buck the herd. It just is. I think it's in our DNA not to buck the herd, not to go off on our own. It's too dangerous. There's too much risk. There are too many enemies in the bush. There's lions that we have to protect ourselves again in a tribe. And if we say no to the tribe, we put ourselves at great risk, no matter how wrong the tribe is. We say no to the king, the leader. We put ourselves at tremendous risk individually. And so I think maybe it is just an evolved trait to ask AOC, to ask Bernie, to ask any of them to truly do what's right when your party is telling you have to do what's wrong. It may just be too much to ask for. Clearly, it's not maybe, it is. Let's hear a little more, though, Cenk, again, giving excuses. So given that fact that Democrats and Republicans you saw Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene doing the right thing, and they're pissed. Taylor Greene was mad that the Congress voted against her so overwhelmingly. Given that it's virtually all but impossible to stand up against the herd, no matter how wrong the herd is, then maybe, the lemmings are going to keep walking off the cliff even when walking off the cliff means they die. And I know some people said, oh, the lemmings really can swim and this and that. Who knows? Maybe they do. I don't know. But humans have demonstrated repeatedly that we will do the wrong thing if that's what the herd wants us to do. If that's what the group think is, we will follow it, especially if it's our little group, our little tribe. We just can't acknowledge it's wrong, just not in our DNA, I guess. So the answer is we got to find other tribes. We got to say, okay, well, we got to get another tribe in there. We got Republican tribe and Democratic tribe, and they're both doing the wrong thing, and neither one can be expected to see it to right the ship. So we have to start electing a green tribe, put them in there. More from Cenk.
Almost everyone in mainstream media are giant liars. So that's the heart of the explanation. I have more details. I want to get to Cenk.
So he's saying first, it's interesting. He give two explanations, because first he says it's all the money that AIPAC spends, but then he also says it's the media that isn't going to tell you about how AIPAC is controlling Congress. So they're related. The two related causes, AIPAC with its donations to lawmakers, its bribes, and then media failing to tell you that it's AIPAC bribes that are causing Congress to vote to continue to fund genocide.
But if you're thinking, but wait a minute, I know there's good people that, in this case, voted in the other direction. AOC, Ro Khanna, Jamie Raskin, Jasmine Crockett, et cetera. Why did they go in that direction?
All right, let me stop it. I'm going to play a little more from his explanation. But what really grabbed me, this is one of the biggest, this is a huge problem, because he got a lot of it right. Cenk is right. AIPAC does pull the strings. It's the puppet master. He's right. It bought the puppet show, AIPAC did, along with some others. You know, there's a bunch of puppet show owners, which Congress is a puppet show. There's a bunch of owners, and you mentioned the oil company, for-profit healthcare, fossil fuel industries, oil companies, others. They are the military manufacturer, weapons manufacturers. They're the puppet masters for sure. And the puppet show would be Congress. And then he also says, hey, the corporate media doesn't tell you. They don't. They refuse. They fail. They're utterly not up to telling you that it's corruption. And then he says, but there's good people too. Why would the good people do it? And the answer is they're not that good. I mean, it's not like, oh, they're good people and they have some explanation. They're not that good. AOC ain't that good. Jamie Raskin, he's not that good. These are dishonest people. Summerlee voted the right way here. Jasmine Crockett, not that good. They're not such good people, Cenk. That's the bottom line. That's why you need to support Greens. But he won't say that. He hasn't reached that point. Maybe he never will. Because he's part of the problem too. He's funded by corporate Dem funders as well.
Because when Israel says it's for my defense, if you don't do that, oh, you're marked for destruction. That is a scarlet letter that you won't be able to get off your, every time you run for anything. If AOC runs for governor, for a senator in New York, or she runs for president, or anyone else runs for anything, they'll be like, oh, they voted against Israel's defense. They voted with the terrorists. And you know who'll say that? Or imply it? Every mainstream media reporter, editor, publisher, because it's a giant Israel protection racket.
All right, so that's true. I mean, he's correct. But that doesn't make them, doesn't justify. Doesn't justify. It explains, I believe, to a significant degree, AOC and Raskin and Crockett and Ro Khanna. It explains it to a degree. Remember, Ro Khanna used to at least own shares of weapons manufacturers as well. It explains to a degree, but remember, there's also that groupthink, that herd mentality that we all have to stand together. We're all Democrats. We have to stand together. So it's a bunch of, it's interlocking really, really bad things that push those so-called good Democrats to do the wrong thing. But part of it is they're not that good. And maybe they had real moral decency. They were morally upstanding people at some point, but you lose it. You lose it over time. I was really intrigued, because Cenk ended his peroration there by bashing mainstream media, saying, hey, if you stood up, if you said no to Israel, you said, no, I'm not going to provide them with the Iron Dome funds. If you did that, you'd get attacked by mainstream media, you'd get attacked by the New York Times, you'd get smashed and bashed by so-called liberal media. And when I heard that, I thought immediately of this article that was in the New York Times yesterday, right? Or it's Dateline yesterday. I don't know when it was put online. Who is watching all these podcasts? So it's amazing, right? This is in the New York Times. There's all these different, like myself, right? I do a podcast. I wish there were all these people watching it. I wish I had numbers like some of the people they mention. And they identify four as very popular. Only one of them is really political, Theo Vaughn. But there's others, of course. Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan isn't just politics at all. He talks about lots and lots of things. I don't watch his program, but I know that for a fact. So this isn't just about political podcasters whatsoever. But political podcasts do well. And again, Theo Vaughn, certainly one of those who does well. And there are many others like Sagar and Crystal. Their show gets hundreds of thousands of views repeatedly. Jimmy Dore. So what is it? Why are they getting many more viewers in many cases than CNN, than MSNBC? In some cases, even than Fox. Some of these get over a million of viewers, or millions of viewers. Certainly, Rogan does. And the Times goes on. Remember, this is all in the question. This is in response to Cenk's question or comment that the reason Congress, 422 to 6, including, as he calls them, good people like Jamie Raskin and Crockett and AOC, the good people in Ro Khanna, even they vote for weapons for Israel. Why do they do that? Because they're afraid of the media bashing them, because they don't take money from AIPAC necessarily. That's his explanation. They're afraid of the media bashing them. And there's true of them, and there's true that, and that's a big reason why people are turning to these podcasts, despite the fact that they're crude, right? They're rudimentary, no fancy. Mine certainly is no fancy camera work. I just have that American flag in the background of my slides, and me. And by the way, I got criticized for that American flag. Hey, I'm not going to give it up. I live in this country. I want this country to be a great place. I'm going to use the flag. I recognize we do terrible things, but I want. And using the flag, and I'm not by any means calling for American exceptionalism, but it's a symbol of our nation. And this program is the mission. My mission is to make us a much better place, and to promote a better world. So no, I'm going to keep the flag up. But again, these rudimentary shows, no fancy camera work, no flashy graphics, no narratives, or very few, and they're long. So why are hundreds of thousands of people turning? It's because, just like Uyghur said, the corporate media is so dishonest. They're not trustworthy. They have their own agenda. It's invariably corporate. It's invariably anti-worker. It's invariably pro-military. And Americans see through that. Now, this is not... It's not a great thing, though, that it is a good thing we have alternatives. I mean, it's a really good thing, but it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that news consumers, because they're turned off with very good reason by traditional media, there's no foregone conclusion that those who are turned off by traditional media are going to turn to truth tellers, progressives, those who are really seeking to create a better world, who are evidence-based. Not at all. No, I mean, that's clearly not the case. People will absolutely turn to propaganda. But what has become abundantly clear to tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, billions around the world, is their concerns are not being addressed. Their concerns are not the concerns of corporate media. The challenges that they face are not being discussed or identified by corporate media, or done so in a kind of a cursory or dishonest way, in a disingenuous manner. So people are looking for media, for news, or for opinion that speaks to the world that they live in, that speaks to the world that they see. And the world that they live in might be a world where the solutions that they believe in are bad, right? Are not good for, like they live in a world, their world is one where wages are stagnant or dropping. Their world is one where they have to compete against people who aren't represented, aren't legally in this country, don't have the proper documentation. They have to compete against them for a job as a house painter, or as a house cleaner, or as a plumber, or as a landscaper. And their solutions may be solutions we really decry, that people say, no, that's wrong. We don't want to deport them. We don't want to separate families. It's wrong to do that. We have to come up with other ways to make sure everyone has enough and no one has too much. But their problems are real and they're not being discussed, they're not being addressed, and there are no solutions being afforded in traditional media. So of course they're going to look look elsewhere to see their lives reflected. That's what's going on. That's why you see so many people. Clearly, that's my answer. Why there's this enormous surge in the popularity of alternative media. And it's not just, media that doesn't get it or media deliberately, they're paid not to get it. They're paid not to discuss or address the terrible challenges, the declining quality of life that perhaps most Americans are now experiencing, right? The dynamic that things keep getting worse for us rather than better. That's something that the media just doesn't want to talk about, don't want to tell you about, unless it's in service of a particular political end, such as, we want to defeat Trump because some of the things he's doing hurts our bottom line, right? Or we want to defeat the Democrats because some of what they're doing hurts our bottom line. But in the end, we're still not going to really talk about the meaning of quote free unquote trade, the beneficiaries, the true beneficiaries, who's hurt by our for-profit healthcare system. We're not going to talk about that. Only to the degree it can benefit us. People get that. They understand it. They understand that the media is fundamentally dishonest. The media's mission is not to present to them the truth that they can use, the facts, but rather to present a certain version of reality that media owners, media top managers, media reporters want you to hear. So people get that. So they turn to other sources, and some of them may really have the best interests of the populace at large and may be motivated by the goal of telling the truth and presenting information and promoting solutions that are really going to be helpful. And I hope that's me. That's what I try to do. Others may see it very differently or may see their role. Rush Limbaugh never saw his role as trying to be, a honest broker or tell the truth. He was very upfront. He said, hey, this show is about me. This show is about making me big. The show is about having me look good at all costs. Yeah. So, that's how some media, and he was good at it. People believed what he had to say, but that wasn't his goal. His goal wasn't, he wanted people to believe him, but his goal wasn't to tell the truth. He couldn't have cared less about that. His goal wasn't to help poor, struggling, and working people. Couldn't have cared less about that. And you know what else? That's sadly the case with politicians too, even ones we like to believe are on our side. I thought this was a really interesting story. Came out, I guess, Thursday, it was the 21st, but I didn't discuss it, I don't believe. But it was I really wanted to sort of ruminate on it, marinate on it. And this goes along, of course, with the Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. The just reluctance, the inability, the failure of either political party, right, to stand up, to stand against the herd. So here's Bernie Sanders, the one who in 2016 said, hey, I'll tell you the truth. The Democratic Party is going to stop me. They're going to do everything they can. They're going to try to stop me. They're going to try to keep us from getting Medicare for all. We're going to have to work our asses off to get it. And I don't know, maybe he saw the instruments, the torture instruments. I don't know what it is, but ever since then, he's really lost his mojo. So when he meets with Zoran Mamdani, by the way, that picture is not of Mamdani with Bernie. It's Mamdani with Chris Van Hollen, my center, who many times I really prefer Chris Van Hollen to Bernie. I think he's a little bit more transparent. I think he's a little bit more sincere. On balance, I prefer Bernie's policies. Bernie really is a Democratic socialist in a lot of ways, supports Medicare for all. Van Hollen doesn't. I'm not enamored with Chris Van Hollen by any means. He's done some really good things, and I think on balance, when I hear Chris Van Hollen speak, he does mince his words a little. He does measure what he says, but I find him to be more sincere. That's just my own belief. That doesn't mean I would necessarily vote for him. I vote for based on policy more than anything else. But I think he's more sincere than the great majority of Democrats or Republicans, and I would be inclined to vote for him, unlike how I feel about most Democrats. What Bernie Sanders told Mamdani about anti-Semitism, this came out. Bernie said, hey, mute your message. Don't be so outspoken against Israel. And we'll get into that. Now, we don't know if this is exactly true. This was something that Jen Perlman talked about on her network, a Revolutionary Change Network, I believe is what it's called. She's a good show, by the way. I like Jen. Look her up. I believe that's what it's called. I don't always agree with anybody, really, except for myself. But Jen said, how do we know? How do we know what Bernie said? And her co-host said, well, there are people who leaked it. They're always going to tell you what's said. So I think Peter was probably right. Well, that we know it was a leak. Here it is. According to a person familiar with the conversation, Sanders told Mamdani he had to do a better job explaining that his criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. So let me stop it right there. I bolded that. Why? Why does he have to do a better job? He won the election. He motivated people. He beat Cuomo, the Israel defender who talks all the time about anti-Semitism 10 by 10 points. Why does I don't understand that? You mean because the media is attacking him? Because there are New York voters who are afraid of anti-Semitism, unreasonably afraid, but are afraid? That's why he needs to? I don't know why you need to. I don't understand that. He has to do a better job. I think he did a really good job of it. He was very clear about it. He said, hey, I'm against all hate crimes. I'm against all bigotry. I've suffered from it myself. Netanyahu's a war criminal. They're killing Palestinians unjustifiably, wrongly. It's murder. That's not, what do you need to explain? What needs to be explained? I'm not going to condemn the term globalize the Intifada. Why should I? See, to me, you don't give in to these people. Unless, if they have a really good point, sure. They don't have a good point. And according to the person familiar, Mamdani can't let himself be seen or seem like, not actually, no one's saying he's actually minimizing the fear Jews in New York and elsewhere feel from the threat of hate, right? It's not actually like there is hate. It's just they feel it, right? Some people hate him, I'm sure. Some people hate me. I'm Jewish. There's people who hate Jews. Okay. People hate everybody, right? That's part of, we're tribal. We hate each other. We hate people in the other tribe. That's right. Why you can't, instead of saying, well, AOC and Bernie or AOC and Raskin are good people. They're good people. They just voted the wrong way because they're afraid of the media. Well, they're in a tribe. That tribe's called the Democratic Party, and they're not going to turn on that tribe. With very few exceptions. If you're Rashida Tlaib, you might turn on it because you're Muslim. If you're Ilhan Omar, you're Muslim. You're in a different tribe. If you're Al Green, that's who you are. You're just this kind of sort of interesting guy who goes off all the time. And same with Marjorie Taylor Greene. she's kind of interesting, and Tom Massey. These are very unique people, very unique Congress members. But the great majority now, this is my tribe. I'm in this herd, and I'm not going to buck it. And that's Bernie. Well, there's the Jews' fear. They have this fear. Why? I'm not aware of what they're afraid of exactly. What's happened? Well, there could be another Holocaust. They're going to push us in the ovens. Really? Is anyone talking about that? The people who are doing the killing are the Jews, not being killed. They're not being killed. So I reject that. He's minimizing the fear. He never minimized it. How did he minimize it? There's no evidence, but that's what Bernie says you got to do. And I really worry maybe Mamdani I'll discourage use of the term globalize the Intifada. No, you should double down on it. Instead of discouraging it, you should say, no, this is exactly what we need to do. Israel just killed 400, 500 people over the weekend. Israel killed 100 people seeking aid. Of course we should globalize the Intifada. Our allies around the world have turned against Israel. The Intifada, whether you should use the phrase or not, is being globalized. So no, you don't stop using it. You use it even more. And I mean, that seems so obvious to me. Bernie's message completely wrong, completely off base. I couldn't disagree more with him. But he's corrupt. He's part of that system. He doesn't even know it probably at this point. All right, 240-242-5640. Maybe he's the one who's afraid. Maybe I shouldn't say he's corrupt, but he's afraid. He's a man in his early to mid 80s now, and he's afraid. And I'm like, what are you afraid of? You got maybe 10 more years left. 15 more years. No one's coming after you. What are you afraid of? Be bold, be strong. That's what we need in Congress. Not someone who's like, oh yeah, you got to tell them that they're right to be scared. And again, completely misreading the current mood, completely misreading what's happening. Is this so-called progressive? Completely misunderstanding what's happening, AOC. Failing utterly to recognize that public opinion in this country and around the world is completely turned against Israel. 25 countries, including Britain, France, a host of Euro countries said the war must end now. And their language is strong. Drip feeding of aid, inhumane killing of civilians and children. So, given that reality, Bernie, why are you telling Mamdani to center the fears of New Yorkers who have nothing to fear, no reason to be afraid? I get it, you want to win election. Maybe that's what you have to do. You have to pander to these people. And, you know, there's real benefit to view yourself as the victim. Makes it a lot easier to do cruel and hurtful things to others and take their land and take their wives, rape their wives and raise their children to be foot soldiers in your army. That's a real value. To serve you in your house. Yeah, that provides you with a value. So it's very self-serving to picture yourself as always a victim. U.S. and Germany did not sign the statement saying Israel has to end the war. Of course we didn't. And AP, this is AP. Just the fact that this story was published in this way and written with this language tells you. It should tell AOC, it should tell Bernie, it should tell Raskin and the rest of that unsavory crew there, Kana. It should tell them. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be so afraid of AIPAC. Maybe we shouldn't be so deferential. Maybe we do need to stand up for the Palestinian people. That's what this should tell them. That even the media, which Cenk said will no matter what always keep for Israel, I'm not even so sure about. Look at this. The AB says Gaza's population is in a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. It's pretty strong language, right? Pretty powerful language that is coming from the Associated Press there. Last week you talked about how the NBC used really strong language against Israel to describe what it's doing on the West Bank and how Israel killed an American citizen from Florida. Very strong language from NBC. So these so-called progressive leaders in Congress aren't even following the changes we're seeing, the changes in public opinion, even the changes in media. And the changes that, interestingly enough, Ezra Klein sort of kind of documents here in this New York Times article why American Jews no longer understand one another. Now, as a New York Jew, some of this, my opinion is he gets some of this pretty much right and much of it he gets wrong. I want to go through it real quick. But this article also, this is in the New York Times, the number one dishonest, disingenuous defender of Israel. I mean, they're not as bad as like a Mark Levin, let's be honest. But the number one liberal defender of Israel, obviously they're not as bad as right-wing media. They're not in that category by any means. But they're not good. They're not telling you what's happening. They're not giving you anything near a full or accurate picture of what's happening in the Middle East, if they can avoid it. Mamdani's tribe in New York City's Dem primary has forced, among many Jews, a reckoning with how far they have drifted from one another. And first of all, I guess, Klein uses that term, which we keep hearing, globalize the Intifada, as an example. Because according, Klein would say, I guess this is true, some Jews are just horrified by that. Oh my God, that's Nazi language. While others don't have, other Jews have no problem with it or even support it, like me. And I think there's truth to that. I think there are a lot of Jewish people, especially maybe people my age, even older, 50 plus, that are very afraid of that term. What do you mean Intifada? What are you talking about? Trying to take Israel away? We need a Jewish state. If they're not a Jewish state, then we're all at risk. The only place we can ever be safe is Israel, right? That's the argument you hear from these people. And, you kind of make it, you kind of create your own reality. Because if Israel is going to be willy-nilly bombing, killing, slaughtering, attacking, torturing, raping, humiliating its neighbors, its Arab citizens and people within its borders, if that's what it's going to do, yeah, people are going to start to really, really, really hate you and want to kill you. That is how it kind of works. Yeah, so you kind of created that reality. It's the case. So, but I've never ever thought of globalized Intifada, and I don't believe there's a good faith argument that globalize the Intifada means kill all the Jews. Whereas it's very, very clear Israel's actions do mean kill all the Palestinians, steal all their land, wipe them off the planet. That's very clear. I've never interpreted globalize the Intifada. I don't think anyone ever has meant it, that you're supposed to kill all the Jews. It's the victim, it's presenting, it's overstating, it's exaggerating the term so you can justify, it's projecting what your goals are onto the other side so then you can justify what you're doing. That's what's happening with that term. And he goes on to say, many older Jews I know are shocked and scared by Mamdani's victory. I would assume that's true. Israel is this is absolutely true with this part. Israel, then we just talked about this, is the world's only reliable refuge for Jewish people, and they see opposition to Israel as a cloak for anti-Semitism. I think that's true. They believe that if the U.S. abandons Israel, Israel will sooner or later cease to exist. That could be true. That could be true. At least it cease to exist as a Jewish state. I think it would at some point realize it has to no longer be an ethno-state. And it shouldn't be an ethno-state. It's wrong. It should not be an ethno-state. Just a little bit more, because this is really, I believe, causing some major rifts in the Jewish communities. And I would also say what's very, very difficult is you have rabbis who simply don't know what to do because they want to grow their congregations. They want to have more younger folk, more families. But at the same time, the donors, the members who give contributions every year in sizable amounts, when they have fundraisers, if they need to, they want to add a wing, those folks are the Zionists. And they're not going to they will not accept, they do not tolerate any apostasy, any break from the totally pro-Zionist line. So the rabbis are tough, but they're cowards too. They should have the courage of their convictions. I can't believe, if you are a true person of God, not that I believe in God, but if you truly are, if you believe in the best aspects of Judaism, Catholicism, whatever, if you believe in those values, you have to recognize that what Israel's doing is wrong. But if you condemn Israel, as you should, you put your own career in grave jeopardy if you don't lose your job altogether. Is that you, Ari, or is this a different caller? I shouldn't guess. But who do we have on the line? And thank you for calling.
Yeah, it's Ari. Hi, Al.
Hey.
Back to the word intifada, because that started becoming a word because of the Palestinian resistance, as I understand it, and I looked it up recently. So if that's the case, well, that's legitimate in a way, because a lot of people are already upset with what Israel is doing. That's obvious. You talked about it several times on your show today also. So if the majority of Americans are sort of drifting towards that point of view, the Palestinian resistance, then just make it more clear, whether it's Mandami or whoever, that we're talking about the resistance to Israeli war crimes, and including the genocide. The Palestinian resistance is becoming more global. So that's the global. That's what I'm taking the middle ground instead of saying.
Well, you're a little concerned that the term could alienate some voters. I understand and appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what, Ari? I'm like, hey, I'm good with it. I hear what you're saying, but I think there's also a risk if he does kind of bend the knee a little bit, that he could also lose people who want a strong, fearless mayor who isn't going to give in to unreasonable demands.
True. I have another number two part. I won't take long because I know you're approaching.
No, please go. Take as long as you like. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to be a little bit of a peacenik today and say, aside the religious ideas and what the Bible said in the Old Testament and the Talmud or whatever, Semitic people have a lot in common. I think that needs to be also brought up, whether it's Mamdani or someone who shows that they have that kind of background and knowledge, and say, Semitic languages are very similar. Semitic peoples, if you want to take it from a linguistic point of view, have a lot of similarities. I know a couple of words that are very similar, like Knesset, and then Kanisa in Arabic. I know just a few words. Bet in Arabic means house. Beit, I think it's called, and then in Hebrew it's bet, etc. And there's a lot of salam, shalom, etc. It's a Semitic relationship that they need to start looking into and say, hey guys, we need to find a common ground here. We're Semitic also. This word Semitic is becoming almost like a misnomer. We have to get rid of it in a way, because Arabs are Semitic. So let's stop saying ethnic-Semitic in the old European medieval meaning. And that's all I had, Hal. That was it.
All right, Ari, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, no, I mean, I wish people weren't killing each other, and there's no question there are similarities. But, people who live right next to each other sometimes go off on rampages and killing sprees. So, unfortunately, proximity can breed a kind of affection, familiarity, trust, but can also breed contempt, anger, and resentment, and those can fester. And in this case, clearly, that's what's happened. Israel has repeatedly oppressed, persecuted, stolen from Palestinians, and they're not happy about it. And Israelis consistently point to, and whether with reason or not, the fact is that they have been targeted for killing by terrorists, by Muslim and Arab terrorists. I mean, that's happened. Of course it has. It's something you'd expect. And they use that to justify even more crackdowns and more persecution and more oppression and more land theft. And then, of course, the response by the Muslims and the Arabs is to react with violence. So It's a vicious circle, not a virtuous one. It is sad. Of course, it's very sad. But I have so much more sympathy. I always do for the underdog, for the oppressed, not the oppressor. This is just a little more. We're kind of going on a bit today, but I'm all right with that. This is what Ezra Klein writes more from the New York Times. Younger Jews voted for Mamdani. They are not afraid of him. Well, there's no reason they should be. What they fear is a future in which Israel is an apartheid state ruling over ruins in Gaza and Bantustans in the West Bank. Let me stop that for a sec. First of all, I was a little bit irritated by this because it seemed to me that what Klein is doing is centering the Jewish experience as what matters to younger Jews. In other words, what younger Jews fear is not, well, what they fear is Israel being an apartheid state ruling over ruins and Bantustans. And what I fear is just the loss of life. What I fear is genocide. What I fear is just horrific. And we were seeing it, right? So I found that a little bit irritating because what it seems as though Klein is centering is the Jewish experience is what matters, not the victims of the Jews. So that irritated me a little bit. And then also he writes that young Jews fear the apartheid state ruling over Bantustans. So I had to look up Bantustans. I kind of thought I knew what it meant, and I was pretty much right. But Bantustans are those territories that South Africa herded together, very, very overcrowded, very slum-like. They call them townships as well, I believe, where they would, black South Africans had to live. And they were a lot of violence, extremely poor, very overcrowded, terrible. And so what Klein is doing is he's equating the incursions, the encroachment, the land theft in the West Bank by Israel and saying what's going to ultimately happen there is they'll create these little Bantustans or isolated settlements, isolated towns of Palestinians, like the towns in South Africa before the end of apartheid where blacks lived. And to me, that's almost like a optimistic future if Israel maintains complete control, because it seems more likely to me that Israel's goal is not Bantustans. Israel's goal is not to have isolated Palestinian centers dotted in the West Bank. Israel's goal is to annex all of it and ultimately either to kill or completely banish Palestinians from that region as well. So it just becomes part of greater Israel. The South African apartheid state, as evil as it was, and I welcome corrections, people who know better, was not, as I understand it, characterized by genocide. They weren't their practice was not to kill black people. Now, a lot of black people were killed. Police killed black people in South Africa with impunity. There's no the value of black life was extremely minimal in apartheid South Africa, but there was no government policy, as I understand it, to kill or eliminate black South Africans, the way there was at least an unofficial American policy to wipe out the indigenous peoples at various times anyway, maybe not throughout our, the history of the West and the settlement of the West or what have you, the Monroe Doctrine, which was to one country from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I don't know that there was an official consistent government policy, but there was often a government policy to herd Indians into smaller and smaller area, native indigenous Americans. So that seems to me more like what Israel's doing than this idea of these townships. But I could be wrong. So I don't think Bantustan fully captures what Israel's project is, which is simply to seize the West Bank completely and make it part of a greater Israel with a great majority of Jews, only Jewish settlers there. Likewise, Gaza. Here's one of those rabbis we talked about, kind of a coward, not really brave, trying to split the baby, trying to see both sides of the issue. And this is a major problem. They have a duty, and I get it's really hard for Rachel Timmer, the senior rabbi at Congregation Beth Elohim, which I'm going to assume is Reform, because the Orthodox are just all in for Israel. But I'll look that up. But also Congregation sounds more Reform to me, less religious. She says, I think portions of the Jewish community are distraught over conditions in Gaza, over the behavior of the government, are in pain over the pull of loyalty and family and humanitarian commitments. And then she says, another portion of the Jewish world feels that we are here in America. We cannot know what it's like to live as Israelis do. Their whole lives surrounded by people trying to kill them. And they feel that what it means to be a Jew is to stand with other Jews in their danger, right? The herd mentality. You can't buck your group. You can't buck your tribe. This is what we said about Raskin, AOC, etc. They're not going to say no to the Democrats. And these very sizable portion of the Jewish population saying no. They're Jews, we're together no matter what, right or wrong. Murderous or not, doesn't matter. And their existential need to be safe. Okay, well, again, this is such a really ultimately a straw argument. The reason that Jews don't feel safe is because they're killing Palestinians. The reason they are, to the extent they're not safe in Israel, is because they're killing Palestinians. To the extent Jews aren't safe in this country, it's basically because they're supporting. Not every Jew, I'm not. I don't feel unsafe. But if I were killed, if some Palestinian supervisor heard me say my name was Ginsburg, figured you're Jewish, and killed me, I wouldn't feel bad. I would be dead. But if I was attacked and they were, screaming Allah Akbar or something of that nature, some kind of Palestinian slogan, as awful as it was, I wouldn't attribute it to Judaism. I would say, well, they hate me because they believe that I'm pro-Israel, that I'm Zionist. So the reason Jews are unsafe is because, to the extent we are unsafe, is because of Israel. That's certainly it's not like the Nazis. They just wanted to kill Jews. That's not the case now. But in the end, I do think that kind of murderous anti-Semitism could return in full force, not just because of Israel, but because of injustice, inequality, resentment. People look at Jews and say, Jews have more. They have more than I do. They live better than I do. It's not right. It's not fair. You have to change that. We have to say, no, everyone has enough. All right, I've gone well over the hour. I didn't think I had gone so long. I will end here, and I'm going to talk tomorrow about the Wall Street Journal article, a little more, return to it, in which the report came out that that Trump had sent this crude, and I'm trying to think what the right word is, caddish, I don't know, birthday greeting to Jeffrey Epstein. We'll talk about that tomorrow and how it's working out, whether it's working out for Trump, as some seem to think. That'll be tomorrow on Halitics. By the way, final note with regard to tomorrow's program, it will not be a Tuesday with Arlen. Arlen is going to be out of, I hate that expression, pocket. I don't know what that even means. But he will not be available we should have Arlen back for the last Tuesday program in July. Now, thank you for being part of Halitics.